Toxic people are not always easy to recognize. Some drain you slowly, with constant complaints and subtle manipulation. Others are more direct, breaking trust, spreading negativity, or even trying to control you through fear. What makes them dangerous is not only what they do, but how easily we allow them to shape our emotions, our time, and even our identity. The Stoics understood this long before the term toxic was used. They knew that human relationships could either elevate or destroy a person's peace of mind, and they trained themselves to separate what is within their control from what belongs to the chaos of others. Think about it. How many times have you left a conversation feeling exhausted, doubting yourself, or carrying a weight that wasn't yours to begin with? That weight is the mark of toxicity. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Spend enough time with bitter, manipulative, or destructive people, and you begin to absorb their colors. That is why the Stoics warned so often about the company we keep. Epictetus reminded his students that if you spend your days with the angry, you will become angry. If you stay with the fearful, you will live in fear. And if you constantly surround yourself with the disrespectful, your own sense of dignity begins to erode. But here is the harsh truth. Toxic people only have power if you hand it to them. Their insults, their manipulation, their negativity, all of it requires your participation to take root. The Stoic path is not about fighting or trying to change them. It is about reclaiming control over your response and deciding who gets access to your mind and who does not. In this video, we are going to explore the 5 levels of toxic people, from the subtle energy drainers to the open saboteurs, and reveal how Stoicism gives us a timeless shield against each one. Because once you see these patterns clearly, you no longer have to live as a victim of other people's poison. You can stand free, untouchable, and firmly in control of your own life. Now, let's begin. Level 1. The energy drainers. At first glance, they don't even look dangerous. They don't insult you, they don't openly attack, and they don't break your trust in one single blow. Instead, they operate like slow leaks in your inner world. These are the energy drainers, the people who constantly complain, who present themselves as helpless victims of life, who always seem to have a new crisis, but never a solution. You meet them for an hour, and you leave feeling like you've carried an invisible weight for days. They don't steal your money, they don't destroy your reputation, but they do something subtler. They drain your most precious currency, your energy, your attention, and your emotional clarity. The Stoics would have recognized this type immediately. Seneca warned that we should guard our time more fiercely than our wealth, because while money can be recovered, lost time never returns. And time isn't just minutes on a clock, it is the quality of our focus, the sharpness of our mind, the peace in our spirit. An energy drainer erodes that, not by dramatic betrayal, but through endless cycles of negativity. They present their problems like offerings at your feet. But when you try to help, they resist every suggestion. When you try to encourage, they return with excuses. Their true aim is not resolution, it is attention. And if you are not careful, you will mistake their endless need for your endless responsibility. Think about a conversation you've had with such a person. At the start, you might feel compassion. You listen, you give advice, you reassure them. But halfway through, you notice your shoulders tense, your patience thin, and your thoughts turning heavy. By the end, you feel drained, almost guilty for not wanting to hear more. This is the trap. They transform your natural empathy into fatigue. You leave the interaction less alive than when you entered. And if repeated often enough, this subtle erosion starts shaping your spirit. The Stoic answer to this is not cruelty, nor is it complete withdrawal at the first sign of difficulty. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that we are social beings, born to help one another. Compassion is part of our duty as rational creatures, but the Stoics drew a clear line. You are to help others without becoming a hostage to their endless demands. Epictetus put it sharply. When you share in someone else's suffering, do not drown in it with them. You may lend a hand, but you must keep your own footing firm on solid ground. Energy drainers often test this boundary because they thrive on reaction. If you rush to fix their problems, they are satisfied, not because the problem is solved, but because you have given them attention. If you refuse to engage, they may accuse you of being cold or uncaring. And this is where the Stoic discipline of indifference becomes essential. Indifference does not mean cruelty. It means refusing to let your peace be captured. You may listen for a moment, you may offer one suggestion, but you must not confuse their constant noise with your obligation to carry it. Seneca once wrote that association with the wrong people can corrupt even the most well-meaning person. If you spend too much time with complainers, you risk becoming one yourself. The negativity seeps into your thoughts, and without realizing it, you begin to echo their patterns. The energy drainer doesn't just steal your vitality, they slowly shape your worldview into one of limitation, fear, and helplessness. That is why Stoicism calls for vigilance. Just as a physician protects the body from infection, you must protect the mind from constant exposure to emotional parasites. So how do you handle them in practice? The Stoic answer has 3 parts. First, recognize the pattern. Don't confuse endless complaining with genuine suffering. Genuine suffering seeks solutions. Draining only seeks more attention. Second, set subtle but firm limits. You can shorten conversations, redirect topics, or even make it clear that you cannot always be available. And third, reclaim your inner response. Instead of leaving the encounter frustrated or guilty, remind yourself, their storm is not mine. My peace depends only on what is within my control. I learned this lesson personally with someone I considered a friend. Every meeting began with a new complaint, a new tragedy, a new frustration. At first, I offered advice, then encouragement, then even practical help, but nothing ever changed. They seemed almost disappointed when solutions appeared, because it meant the drama might end. Over time, I realized that the more I gave, the less energy I had for my own life. It was Seneca's warning made real. I was handing over my limited time to someone who treated it as worthless. When I began setting limits, meeting less often, refusing to be the constant audience for their complaints, something powerful happened. My energy returned, and they, surprisingly, found new people to drain. It was never about me. It was about their hunger for attention. The first level of toxic people is dangerous precisely because it feels so subtle. They are not villains. They are not openly cruel. They may even seem like they need your compassion most. But if you are not careful, they will bleed your energy slowly until you wake up living more in their problems than in your own life. The Stoic shield here is clarity. To see that helping is not the same as being consumed, and that your peace is not a gift you owe to everyone who demands it. So the next time you leave a conversation feeling drained, stop and ask yourself, was this compassion or was this captivity? The difference is everything, because energy, once given away, does not return. And the Stoics would remind you that your highest duty is to use it for what truly matters, for virtue, for clarity, for the life you were meant to build. Level 2, the silent manipulators. If the energy drainers work through exhaustion, the silent manipulators operate through subtle corrosion. They rarely shout, they rarely show open hostility, and often they wear the mask of humor or concern, but underneath lies the same poison, an attempt to control your emotions and decisions without ever appearing to do so. These are the people who speak in backhanded compliments, who joke in ways that sting, who constantly plant seeds of guilt or doubt in your mind. Their power is not in the loudness of their attack, but in the quiet repetition of small cuts that accumulate until your confidence bleeds away. The Stoics would describe them as those who disturb the ruling faculty, the hegemonikon, the part of the soul that judges reality. Because manipulation works not by force but by distortion. A manipulator twists your perception of yourself until you no longer trust your own judgment. Epictetus warned about this when he said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish." Why? Because manipulators thrive on your need for approval. If you need their validation, they can pull the strings. If you are willing to be misunderstood, you break their game. Imagine this scene. You share an idea at work, something you've thought carefully about. A manipulator doesn't attack directly. Instead, they smirk and say, "Interesting, though I suppose that kind of thing usually sounds better on paper than in practice." The room laughs lightly. You feel a flush of embarrassment, and suddenly you're doubting yourself. Did they prove your idea weak? No. They simply planted doubt in the soil of your mind, and if you water it with overthinking, it grows into insecurity. This is the silent manipulator's strategy. They rarely fight you openly, but they make you fight yourself. The Stoic defense here is clarity about what belongs to you and what does not. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Notice the precision, right and true. A manipulator blurs those lines. They mix half-truths with sarcasm, concern with criticism, affection with guilt. But the Stoic discipline is to separate what is real from what is noise. If a comment is vague, sarcastic, or wrapped in double meanings, ask yourself, does this reflect my character, my actions, my reason? Or is it simply their projection? More often than not, you'll see that their words reveal them, not you. But why do we fall for it? Because we crave harmony. Humans are social animals, and as Aristotle and the Stoics agreed, our nature is communal. We want to belong, to be approved, to be seen as good. Manipulators weaponize this desire. They make us feel that disagreeing with them or refusing their subtle demands makes us selfish, cold, or disloyal. They play on guilt like an instrument, and the more we respond, the more skilled they become at composing our reactions. I once had a colleague who was a master at this. Whenever I declined to take on extra tasks, they would sigh and say, "Of course I understand. You're probably too busy with more important things." Spoken with a smile, but underneath was the message, "You're selfish if you don't help me." For months I fell into the trap, taking on more than I should, feeling that refusing would make me appear unkind. Then one day, I remembered Epictetus. No one can harm you without your consent. The harm wasn't in their words, it was in my consent to believe them. When I stopped responding to the guilt, when I answered simply, "Yes, I'm focusing on my tasks," without justification, the manipulation lost its force. The Stoics teach us that manipulation can only work if we hand over our judgment. If you know who you are, if you act from principle rather than reaction, the silent manipulator has no entry point. Their sarcasm bounces off, their guilt trips dissolve in the air, their passive-aggressive remarks die in silence. The antidote is not aggression, it is indifference rooted in clarity. As Seneca put it, "The crowd may jeer, but I applaud myself." So how do you deal with them in practice? First, name the pattern. Recognize that jokes with a sting, guilt wrapped in kindness, or subtle digs are not harmless. They are deliberate tools. Second, refuse over-explanation. Manipulators thrive when you justify yourself endlessly. Respond briefly, firmly, without the need for their approval. Third, practice selective indifference. Not every comment deserves your energy. When someone says you've changed, you're not the same person, you can simply nod and say yes without defending. Their trap collapses when you don't step into it. The deeper danger of silent manipulators is not just that they hurt you, it is that they reshape you. You begin to self-censor, to second-guess, to anticipate their digs before they arrive. This is the corrosion of dignity. But the Stoic remedy is daily practice in self-rule, to remind yourself every morning, as Marcus Aurelius did, that you will meet the deceitful, the arrogant, the manipulative, and yet none of them can touch your soul unless you permit it. Level 2 of toxic people is insidious because it doesn't look like an attack. It looks like humor, concern, or casual conversation. But the cost is real. Your confidence, your clarity, your ability to trust your own judgment. That is why the Stoic shield must be sharpened here, not with anger, not with endless confrontation, but with unshakable self-possession. When you refuse to let silent manipulators bend your reason, they lose the only weapon they ever had, your consent. Level 3, the disguised narcissists. By the time you reach this level, the mask becomes more polished. Narcissists are not always obvious. They do not always enter a room announcing their greatness or demanding attention. The most dangerous kind often appear generous, attentive, even charming. They know how to mirror your emotions, how to give you just enough recognition to keep you hooked. But beneath the surface lies the same engine. Their world must orbit around them. The disguised narcissist drains not by endless complaints or subtle jabs, but by making every relationship a one-way street. You give, they take. You listen, they talk. You sacrifice, they demand more. The Stoics would have called this a corruption of nature. Marcus Aurelius wrote that human beings exist for the sake of one another, to cooperate like rows of teeth or hands working together. The disguised narcissist breaks this harmony. They demand cooperation without ever offering it in return. They expect loyalty without loyalty, admiration without virtue, attention without respect. And because they often hide their selfishness beneath charm, we mistake their hunger for leadership, their need for admiration for confidence. In reality, it is dependency disguised as strength. I once knew someone who fit this pattern perfectly. In public, they were charismatic, always ready with praise, always appearing interested. In private, however, every conversation bent back toward them. If I shared good news, they found a way to outshine it with their own story. If I admitted weakness, they used it later as proof of their superiority. At first, I thought this was coincidence, then personality, then harmless ego. But slowly, I realized that every exchange left me diminished, while they left replenished, as if my energy had been transferred into their reservoir of self-importance. The Stoic defense here is radical clarity about where your worth comes from. How a disguised narcissist thrives when you seek their approval, when you measure your value through their recognition. Epictetus reminds us, if you want to be free, let your desire be nothing that depends on others. Approval is outside your control, and therefore it cannot be your foundation. When you stop chasing their praise, their power collapses, but this is harder than it sounds. Narcissists are skilled at rewarding you in small doses. They withhold validation, then give it sparingly, so that you crave it like water in the desert. This is not love, it is control. The Stoic approach is to cultivate autarkia, self-sufficiency, to ground your dignity in your actions, your principles, your character. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy," he meant precisely this. You do not need to win their game. You need to live above it, untouchable by their manipulation of attention. Here's a practical Stoic exercise. The next time you feel drawn to impress someone who only gives admiration in fragments, pause and ask, would I still value this action if no one saw it? If the answer is yes, you are acting from virtue. If the answer is no, you are chasing validation, and you've already stepped into the narcissist's trap. Disguised narcissists also erode relationships by creating dependency. They make you feel that you need them, that without their guidance, charm, or approval, your life loses meaning. But the Stoics dismantled this illusion. For them, every human being is a complete rational soul, capable of wisdom and choice. Needing another's admiration is not nature, it is corruption. Nature requires cooperation, not worship. The most dangerous part of dealing with these narcissists is that you may not notice the change in yourself until it's too late. You start small, adjusting your words so they are pleased, holding back your success so they do not feel threatened, doubting your own perspective because theirs sounds more confident. Slowly, you become a satellite spinning around their sun. This is why Marcus Aurelius insisted, do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about others when you neglect to direct your own soul. To orbit another's ego is to abandon your own path. So how does Stoicism tell us to respond? First, by reclaiming independence of thought. Journal daily as the Stoics did, to remind yourself of your values. Second, by testing your motivations. Act because it is right, not because it will impress. Third, by limiting exposure. You may not be able to cut them off immediately, but you can choose how much access they have to your mind and heart. A disguised narcissist only has as much power as you grant them. The third level of toxic people is more dangerous than the first two because it seduces rather than exhausts. It whispers instead of shouting. It convinces you that giving endlessly is noble, that admiration is earned by diminishing yourself. But the Stoic truth is sharper. Self-respect is not negotiable. You were not born to orbit another's ego. You were born to live according to reason, to virtue, to your own nature. And the moment you see through the disguise, You can step out of their shadow and walk once again under your own sun. Level 4. The trust breakers. If the first levels of toxicity work by draining, manipulating, or demanding attention, the fourth level strikes at something far deeper: trust. Trust is the invisible contract that makes human connection possible. It is what allows us to be vulnerable, to share our thoughts, to walk without suspicion among those we call friends or family. When that trust is broken, the damage goes beyond words or gestures. It touches the very foundation of belonging. Trust breakers are toxic, not because they are loud, but because they turn intimacy into a weapon. They betray confidences, distort your words, expose your weaknesses, and in doing so they erode the most sacred bond of all, the belief that someone has your back. The Stoics would call this a violation of nature itself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that human beings were made for cooperation, for truth, for shared duty. To betray trust is to rebel against this natural order. Seneca too warned that treachery corrodes not just the victim, but the perpetrator. For a liar or betrayer cannot live at peace even with themselves. A person who destroys trust becomes enslaved to deceit, always weaving new justifications to cover old disloyalties. But for the one betrayed, the pain is sharper. What once felt safe now feels dangerous. What once was private now feels exposed. Think of a moment when you entrusted someone with a piece of your life, perhaps a personal struggle, a secret ambition, a fear you rarely voiced. You believed it was safe in their hands. Then, days or weeks later, you hear your words repeated, twisted, or mocked in another's mouth. In that instant, a part of you closes. You no longer feel free to speak, no longer able to relax in their presence. That small death of openness is the toxin that trust breakers leave behind. I once experienced this with someone I considered close. In confidence, I shared a doubt about a professional decision. It was not weakness, merely honesty. Weeks later, I discovered that same confession repeated at a gathering, framed as incompetence. What was once a private moment of vulnerability became a public judgment. The wound was not only in the exposure, it was in realizing that the very person I trusted had carried the knife. The Stoic response here is not blind forgiveness, nor is it eternal resentment. It is the balance between release and memory. Epictetus said, "When someone has done you wrong, do not dwell on it, but do not trust them too quickly again." Forgiveness in Stoicism is not about excusing betrayal, it is about freeing yourself from the poison of anger. Anger, after all, chains you to the wrongdoer, keeps you replaying their offense endlessly. By forgiving, you break the cycle. But forgetting, that would be folly. A scar remains, and rightly so. The scar is not bitterness, it is wisdom. It tells you where not to expose yourself again. Trust breakers often rely on your willingness to minimize their act. They say, "It wasn't that serious," or "You're being too sensitive." But the Stoics would reject such dismissal. For them, integrity is absolute. Seneca observed that a liar is not believed even when he tells the truth. Once the bond of trust is shattered, the relationship changes fundamentally. You may still interact, you may still offer courtesy, but the sacred intimacy is gone. The wise Stoic does not pretend otherwise, so how do we handle trust breakers in practice? First, by reclaiming your boundaries. Once someone proves careless with your vulnerability, you owe them no further access to it. You can still wish them well, but you do not hand them the keys to your inner world again. Second, by resisting bitterness. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the best way to avenge yourself is not to become like your enemy. Do not let betrayal turn you into the same kind of deceiver. Hold to your honesty, your clarity, your dignity. Third, by learning the lesson. The scar teaches you discernment, who is worthy of confidence and who is not. The deepest danger of trust breakers is not only that they wound you once, but that they teach you to close your heart too tightly afterward. The temptation is to become suspicious of everyone, to live guarded, armored, unwilling to open again. But this, too, is poison. The Stoics would urge a middle path. Protect yourself with wisdom, but do not let one betrayal destroy your ability to connect with others, To deny all trust is to deny our nature as social beings. To give trust blindly is to invite further wounds. Wisdom is to walk between the two. The fourth level of toxic people is perhaps the most painful because it strikes at intimacy and corrodes belonging. But the Stoic answer is steady. Forgive for your peace. Remember for your safety and rise above resentment without falling into naivety. Let scars remind you, but let them also refine you. A trust breaker may steal your confidence once, but they need not dictate the openness of your soul forever. Level 5. The direct saboteurs. The final level of toxic people removes all disguise. Here the hostility is not subtle, not hidden under jokes or charm. Direct saboteurs seek to undermine you openly. They attack your reputation, your confidence, your opportunities. Some do it through open criticism, others through calculated actions that place obstacles in your path. Unlike the energy drainers or silent manipulators, these people do not merely feed on your attention. They want to see you stumble, to feel that their control or resentment has tangible impact on your life. The Stoics would see them as the clearest test of inner sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning, "Today I will meet the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful, the envious, the unsocial." He was preparing for saboteurs, not in the abstract, but as an inevitable fact of human life. For the Stoic, the presence of those who wish you harm is not a tragedy, it is training ground. Each encounter becomes an opportunity to practice resilience, self-control, and the art of distinguishing what is within your power from what is not. Direct saboteurs come in many forms. Some are rivals who cannot stand your success, so they spread lies or twist your achievements into faults. Others are bitter friends or colleagues who use your trust to sabotage from within. Sometimes they are even family members whose jealousy or insecurity drives them to hold you back. The common thread is deliberate intent. While other toxic people harm indirectly, saboteurs choose to strike. Their satisfaction comes not just from your attention, but from your fall. I once saw this unfold in a workplace. A colleague, threatened by another's rising success, began whispering doubts to superiors, questioning their competence, exaggerating minor mistakes, creating a shadow of distrust. The target, confused and frustrated, fought hard to defend their reputation. But here lies the trap. The more you fight every rumor, the more energy you lose, and the more power you hand over to the saboteur. The Stoics would counsel a different path. Focus on your own virtue, your own excellence, and let actions speak louder than counterattacks. As Epictetus said, "If you are ever tempted to look for outside approval, realize that you have compromised your integrity." The Stoic defense against direct saboteurs has three pillars. First, clarity of control. Their actions may damage reputation or create obstacles, but your character remains untouched. A lie can circulate, but truth endures, and only you determine whether you live in accordance with reason and virtue. Second, strategic distance. You do not need to stay in their arena. Just as Seneca advised to avoid corrupt crowds lest you become like them, so too you can limit contact with those who thrive on your harm. Third, unyielding composure. The saboteur's greatest victory is your anger. When you explode, they win. When you remain calm even in the storm, you remind them and yourself that their power stops where your mind begins. Direct saboteurs also reveal something crucial about human dignity. It cannot be stolen. Marcus Aurelius endured constant sabotage at the Roman court, political rivals, jealous generals, even those within his family. Yet his meditations reveal no obsession with revenge. Instead, he wrote, "The best way to defend yourself is not to mirror them." In other words, let them betray, let them conspire, but do not let them drag you into the mud of their methods. To remain just, disciplined, and clear-minded in the face of sabotage is to prove your sovereignty. But let us not be naive. Sometimes sabotage has real consequences. Lost opportunities, damaged relationships, temporary setbacks. The Stoic response is not denial, but transformation, to see even these wounds as material for virtue. Seneca insisted that adversity is the training ground of the wise. If someone sabotages your path, build another. If they stain your reputation, Let your consistent actions wash it clean. What is taken from you outwardly can become fuel for greater strength inwardly. Here lies the paradox. Direct saboteurs, while the most hostile, are also the least dangerous to your essence. Energy drainers can wear you down slowly. Manipulators can twist your self-perception. Narcissists can enslave you through your need for approval. Trust breakers can scar your openness to others, but the saboteur, by attacking openly, forces clarity. You see them for what they are, and the choice is laid bare. Will you waste your life in resentment, or will you rise above unbroken? The fifth level of toxic people is the ultimate test of Stoic practice. To face sabotage without collapsing into rage or despair is to embody the highest strength, self-rule. The saboteur can block your road, but they cannot stop your journey. They can tarnish your name, but not your soul. They can wish you ruin, but only you decide whether you remain whole. So when you encounter them, and you will, remember, the Stoics prepared for such people not with bitterness but with calm foresight. Their poison is real, but only fatal if you drink it. Let them plot, let them conspire. You continue forward, steady, disciplined, untouchable. That is sovereignty. That is freedom. Toxic people will always exist. From the subtle energy drainers to the open saboteurs, human relationships carry shadows as well as light. The mistake is believing that the presence of toxic people means the end of peace, as if our dignity could only survive in perfect conditions. The Stoics rejected this illusion. They knew that peace does not depend on the world being safe, but on the soul being steady. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he would meet the ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful. He expected them, not with bitterness, but with calm readiness. Looking back across the 5 levels, a pattern emerges. The first 3, drainers, manipulators, and disguised narcissists, feed on our need for approval, for harmony, for validation. They poison us slowly, eroding our clarity until we cannot tell where their influence ends and our own voice begins. The 4th and 5th, trust breakers and saboteurs, strike harder, wounding intimacy and openly opposing our path. But the Stoic lesson is the same at every stage. They cannot touch what is truly ours. Our judgment, our choices, our character, these belong to us alone. The world will test you with people who complain without end, who twist your words, who demand admiration, who betray confidences, who try to bring you down. But none of them can dictate your response. That is the essence of Stoic freedom. You do not need to fight every insult, explain every choice, or prove your worth to those who do not respect it. You need only live in alignment with reason, virtue, and your own inner compass. Think of it like this. Toxic people throw stones into the river of your life. If you chase each stone, you drown. But if you remain still, the water carries the stone away, and the current continues forward. The Stoics teach us to be that current, steady, unbroken, moving toward the good regardless of obstacles. So let this be your shield: clarity of control, discipline of emotion, and dignity that does not depend on the approval or betrayal of others. Whether facing the silent stare of manipulation or the open attack of sabotage, remember, the power to remain unshaken is already within you. Toxicity may surround you, but it never has to live inside you.